Okay, good evening, everyone. And I want to thank, first, before we start anything, I want to thank Mrs. Bloom for once again inviting me to speak to TLC, and for my dear friend Rabbi Brander for Link Kolel for sponsoring tonight's event together with TLC and Makor Chaim. And it's always really an honor and a pleasure to be able to speak with people that are yearning and striving to grow. We're only holding just less than 24 hours before TISHA B'Av. Unfortunately, it's getting close. And you could be doing a lot of other things tonight. You could be drinking vitamin water, you could be eating pasta, you could be out having a meal because you know that before you know it, it's going to be time to fast. But that you dedicate time to be able to come and learn a little bit more, perhaps an insight into what is the miraculous koyach, the power of the day that we're going to have tomorrow night and the entire day of Thursday. So it's something that speaks a lot about you. And that's why it's always an honor. I don't hesitate to say yes for the opportunity to speak to these young women from TLC and hear anybody else that is listening tonight, because I feel that it's impressive, always impressive to see just where they're holding. We know that tomorrow night, as we mentioned, is going to be the dreaded night of TISHA B'Av. A night that goes back in our history for thousands and thousands of years. In reality, if we don't understand the original cause of a TISHA B'Av, it's very hard to understand what we're supposed to have in our minds tomorrow. When we're sitting on the floor and we're listening to Eicha, and we read the Kinais, and we go through all of the dirge of TISHA B'Av. Maybe you'll spend the day watching videos of all of the inspiring and insightful speakers and the lessons that they have to offer us, how to make peace with our friends, with our family, how to make peace inside of ourselves. But if we don't understand a deeper level of what we are getting ourselves into tomorrow night, it's very hard to connect to the Yom, to the day itself. So I would like to start with the famous Gemara that talks about the first TISHA B'Av in history. And the Gemara says over there that the Jewish people, they were running through the wilderness and they were heading into Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people, we're ready to go, we're on the edge of the land. Hashem has told us that it's a good land, we have nothing to worry about, let's go. And we know the story that they said, you know what, let's send Meraglim, let's send spies in there first. The spies themselves will see what's going on in the land. We'll be able to know if we're able to conquer the nations that are there. We'll have a much better picture and an image of how we're going to walk in and conquer that land of Eretz Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm not so sure. He asked Hashem. Hashem said, you don't need to. Eretz Toivehi, it's a good land. I told you that already. You have nothing to worry about. And nevertheless, the people decided to send in the spies, great people, who went into the land of Israel to spy out the land to see if it was something that was doable for them. And when they came back, first they began saying all these wonderful accolades about the land of Israel, but afterwards, unfortunately, they began to speak Lashon Hara about the land of Eretz Yisrael. And they painted such a dreary and a gloomy picture, such a frightening existence that the Jewish people were going to get themselves into. They frightened the nation. And the Gemara says, "Vatisa kol ha'eda, vayidnu es kolam, vayivcho am balaylahu." All of the Jewish people who heard these terrible reports from the spies, they lifted up their voices. Vayivcho am, and the nation cried on that evening, on that night. On that night they cried. Amar Rambam Rabbi Yochanan, Oisa Yom. What was that day? TISHA B'Av. The night that the spies came back from the land of Israel. And they told over to the Jewish people all the horrible things that were going to befall them when they walked into that land. And the Jewish people began crying out of control. It was hysteria, national hysteria. Says the Gemara, that was TISHA B'Av, that was the 9th day in the month of Av. Hayom alam HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the Jewish people the following: Atem bechisem bechiyah chinam. You cried a cry and tears that were chinam, that were free for no reason at all. V'ani kaivei lachem b'chia ledoros chorav habayis. I will set for you a day, this day, Tisha B'Av. For all generations, it will be a day of crying, of real tears. And what are those real tears? Those are going to be the tears that would eventually bring about Chorav Habayis Kurishayna. The first Beis HaMikdash will be destroyed, and the second Beis HaMikdash, the second temple, will be destroyed on that as well. Now this Gemara itself is very puzzling. The Jewish people are being condemned, first of all, 40 years wandering around in the wilderness. And besides the 40 years of wandering around in the wilderness, it is condemned that every single year on the night of Tisha B'Av, it's going to be a night of bechia, of crying, but real tears, not fake tears, not the crocodile tears of the Jewish people at that time. It's going to be a night where there's going to be such churban, such destruction. We'll never be able to forget what took place in our history. The destruction of the first temple, the second temple, so many other wars which were fought, so many other battles, so much other destruction that took place over there. And the question begs to be asked, what did the Meraglim, what did the spies do that was so terrible? And what did the Jewish people, how did they react, which was so terrible? They cried, okay. They got afraid, they got scared, so they cried. And those tears, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, should not have cried those tears. And because that you did, I have no choice now. I'm going to punish you for the rest of the generations of the Jewish people on that night. The history of Tisha B'Av will never ever be the same again. There will be destruction, there will be hardships, there will be challenges, there will be killing, there will be death, there will be all different things. My camera just go out?
Yes, it went out.
Okay. We're back. So it says in the, so the question is, what exactly did the Jewish people do that was so terrible that it brought about mass destruction for thousands and thousands? Let's try this one more time. So the question is that we have to deal with is, what exactly is it that the Jewish people did that was so terrible, so terrible, that they deserved a punishment on this scale? This is not like a slap on the wrist. This is not go to your room without dinner tonight, you get breakfast in the morning. This is a punishment that transcends all of the years of history of the Jewish people, and it brought about destruction for what? For Lashon Hara? Because they spoke bad about the land of Israel, because the Jewish people cried that night. They were afraid to go into Eretz Yisrael after they heard the tales of the Meraglim, of the spies. What was so terrible? So the truth of the matter is, the Mefarshim, the commentators on the Chumash, they are also bothered by this as well. And they look to try to find what exactly was the terrible thing which took place on this night that we had in the wilderness. And they say over the following idea, which itself is fascinating. Rav Hirsch writes in the Chumash, Rav Hirsch writes that when Moshe and Aaron came, and Rav Hirsch writes that when the Meraglim, when the spies came, and they began producing all of this slander on the land of Eretz Yisrael, the Ramban writes that they fabricated what they saw. They made up stories. It wasn't really as bad as they made it sound. Nevertheless, by doing so, says Rav Hirsch, they frightened the people and they brought them to the point of complete despair. When the Meraglim came in and they began to share with the Jewish people their perception of the land of Israel being a land that was going to swallow them up, and it was going to eat them alive, and there were giants that were walking around, and there was a lot of death everywhere, and they would never be able to overcome it. When the Meraglim, when the spies told us over, you know what they created? The national hysteria that they created in the Jewish people is that they actually made us believe that we were hopeless and that we should give up and despair, there's no way in the world that we're ever going to be able to conquer the land of Israel on our own. And this brought the Jewish people to become weakened in their emunah, in their faith. And that weakness in their faith brought them to hysteria, to being frightened and anxious. And that fright and that fear and that anxiety and that weakness in their connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom, what did it bring them? It brought them to the point where they totally gave up hope. They no longer believed that they're going to be able to fight the battles and win the war and go into the land that Hashem already promised them. I told you, Eretz Toivahi, it's a good land. Now still, why is this so destructive? So the Jewish people, you knocked them off the horse. So they were no longer thought that they could be invincible and accomplish whatever they wanted to. They got nervous over that they wouldn't be able to win the battles. They began to despair. What's so terrible? It's a normal thing. People go through challenging situations in their life and they begin to have a little bit of despair. People go through nisyonos. They go through the tests of life. They go through pain and suffering, all the different things. They begin to despair a little bit. Why are the Jewish people not allowed to despair? If we think about our existence, and we go back to the original Jew that there was in this world, or the prototype of the Jew, Avraham Avinu, we know that we find in him the DNA of what it means to be a Jew and what it means to be someone that doesn't give up hope in anything. Avraham Avinu was married for many, many years to his wife. He's 100 years old, his wife is 90 years old, they have no children. And he tells the Rebbeinu Shalom, what's going to be? I built my life, I served you, HaKadosh Baruch, I spent so many years finding you, I fought against all the idol worship in this world, I stood on my own just for you, Hashem. Where is the answer of who's going to be the offspring that's going to live on the legacy that I've left in this world? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, don't worry. Come outside for a moment. I want you to look beyond the stars, beyond the regular spectrum of this world, and see that the Jewish people are on a higher level. And if I said you're going to have offspring, and someone's going to carry on your legacy, you have nothing to worry about. And suddenly a 100-year-old man and a 90-year-old woman end up having a child. And Avraham Avinu cherishes that child 37 years of his life. He lives with him, he learns with him, he raises him, he teaches him every trick of the trade of how to be a leader of the people. And then Hashem says, Avraham Avinu, you love that son so much, don't you? You care about him more than anything, don't you? You want him to follow in your footsteps more than anything, don't you? Yes, Hashem, of course. Good, take him up to the mountain. I want you to shecht him. Really, shecht him. Avraham Avinu doesn't ask a single question on Hashem. He takes his son, he walks him to the mountain, he's ready to shecht him. Only at the very last minute does Hashem send in the ram, and his son is saved, and they live happily ever after. Yitzchak himself, a man who has to go through tremendous challenges in his life, and never once does he waver in his amun, in his faith in the Rebbeinu Shalom. He's strong and solid as a rock. He lives on his father's teachings for all of his life. He doesn't despair of anything. Yaakov Avinu, his son, also goes on to have 12 children, illustrious children, who will become the leaders of Klal Yisrael. He fights against his father-in-law, he fights against his brother-in-law, he fights against losing his son Yosef, he fights against everything. But at the end of the day, there was never anybody as holy as a Yaakov Avinu. The basis of our nation, the core of who we are, where we come from, the DNA that we are made up of. We are a nation of people that never throw in the towel. We never give up hope for 1 second. Because as long as we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on our side, and He is, He always is, as long as we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on our side, then a Jew never has anything in his life to worry about. And if he does, and if he gets anxious, and he gets frustrated and angry and down and broken and sad, then we're not acting like a Jew. And if an entire nation goes into panic because the Meraglim, the spies, came back and they said, you're not going to be able to go into that land and conquer the land, and everybody's crying from despair, then the nation is no longer acting like the Jewish nation. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you are not going to act like the Jewish people, if you are not going to appreciate the lineage that you come from, if you're not going to realize the koichais, the energy, the powers that are inside of you, what you could accomplish, where you could go in this world, so then these tears that you are crying tonight are tears that will be cried for doros, for generations and generations and generations, until you will get the message of what it means to be a Jew. A Jew doesn't give up hope. We never need to. There's an amazing, amazing story of a young boy by the name of Sammy Rosenbaum. This goes back to a small town in Germany called Ravko, right around the time of the Nazi, Yamach Shemam, the Nazis coming into the town and beginning to take it over. And Sammy was a fragile child, a sweet little boy, sunken in eyes a little bit after all of that which he saw going on in front of him. And he had his mother and a father and a sister, and they lived together in a small little apartment over there in this small German town. One week, they hear the news that the Germans are coming into the town right next to it, and they're setting up shop. And in that town where they're going to set up shop, they are making it a training ground, a training course to teach these Nazis how to become the harsh, cruel people that they had to become. And they would kill many people every day just to teach them, when you hear a woman's voice crying for her children, or you see a father shouting and screaming because his wife is being killed, so you don't feel bad for them at all. And you never get weak in your heart. And so they went through several months where they were going through this training period. And the Nazis would come into the town and they would round up 50, 75, 100, on bad days 150 Yidden from that town, and they would shoot them and they would kill them, usually in public display so that everybody could see what's going to happen to the Jews. And the Nazis were becoming more and more ruthless and harsh as the days went on. One of the biggest Rashoyim, one of the most wicked commanders or commandants of that time, was a man by the name of Wilhelm Rosenbaum. And they would used to bring him lists of all the Jews that lived in that town, and he would decide which ones you're going to go to kill and which ones you're going to leave, which ones you'll ship off to the concentration camps. And one day as he's going through the list, he gets to the letter R. And he sees the letter R has a family of Jews called the Rosenbaum family. And this man who has a whip, he walked around with a whip all the time. His face turns red. His veins start popping out of his neck. And he begins smashing on the table with his whip. And he said, "Filthy Jews! How dare a filthy Jew take my name Rosenbaum and use it for themselves? A good German name like Rosenbaum becomes the name of a Jew. They must be killed immediately." And he sends out the order that he wants the Rosenbaum family brought down immediately from their apartment, from their house. He wants to take care of them himself. And so sure enough, they get in their jeeps and they drive down to the house where the Rosenbaums live. And the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, they pull them out of their house. They pull out the mother, the father, and the sister. The young boy Sammy was working already in some kind of labor camp over there in that town. And this Wilhelm Rosenbaum begins screaming and yelling at them. And he says, "The nerve of you to take my good German name and make it for your own." And on the spot he kills the mother and the daughter. And then before he kills the father, he begins beating the father mercilessly. And he tells him, you filthy swine, you Jew, you think that you're going to get away with this? You take my German name and you make it a Jewish name like yours? How dare you? He beats him and he beats him and he beats him. And then with his pistol, he shoots him 3 times and he kills him. And now Wilhelm looks at one of the Jewish capos. These were the Jews who had started to help the Nazis in order to save their own lives. And he says, get me the boy. The boy is not here. I want the boy here as well. And the capo wished that he wasn't asked to do such a thing. And he went to this labor camp area where they were in the town. And as he walks in, his eyes right away find this young boy, Sammy, who's schlepping a rock that's twice the size of him, trying to do his job. And immediately, as soon as Sammy sees this capo standing there, he knows exactly what he came for. And the capo walks over, hoping that Sammy's going to run away because he doesn't want to have to do this to him. But Sammy was valiant, and he was brave. And he said to the capo, they killed my parents, didn't they? And my sister. I heard already, you don't have to tell me. And now you've come for me. I know. No fighting, no screaming, no trying to run away, no why me, nothing. He goes easily with the capo guard. And as they are driving to go to his end, he asked the guard, would it be possible that I could run up to my house for just a few moments to take care of something before I leave this world? And the capo had so much mercy on this young boy, said, certainly. And they pull up in front of his house, and he goes up the stairs, and the capo, of course, is following him. And he goes into his kitchen, and he pulls out 2 candlesticks, another 2 candlesticks, and another 2 candlesticks. And he lights 6 candles there in his house. 2 for his father, 2 for his mother, and 2 for his sister. And then this little 9-year-old boy standing in his kitchen for the very last time, as he's looking at the candles and he's reminiscing about his family, he begins to say the holy words of Kaddish. The only Kaddish that his parents and his sister would ever have. And then he spent a few more moments looking at the candles, and then it was time to leave for his own death. And as they get back to the car, he says, wait 1 second. I forgot one thing. And he runs back up the stairs to his apartment, and he pulls out 2 more candles, and he lights those candles as well. And he says Kaddish 1 more time. And then he turns to the capo and he says, I'm ready to go now. And as they get back to the car, he says, I understand the first 3. You said Kaddish over your parents. What was the last set of candles? And with pure innocence in his eyes, Sammy turns to the capo guard and he says, I was lighting candles and saying Kaddish for myself. At this point, the capo guard began crying. The emotions of the moment got too much, and he broke down crying. And Sammy wiped away the tears from his eyes. And he told him, don't cry. You're only doing what you have to do. This is the way it's supposed to be. And he drives him to Wilhelm Rosenbaum. And his life is taken in an instant. Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, the inertia, the energy that is inside of us, the power of the neshama, that which is able to supersede any tragedy and any pain and anything that is going on in our lives, that's the nature of the Jewish people. A 9-year-old boy can say Kaddish for his mother and his father and his sister, and then on himself, and not even shed a tear. That's the koyach, that's the power that's inside of us. If you take that away from Klal Yisrael, you take that away from the Jewish people, you've just destroyed our nation. When the Meraglim came in, after those horrible words of Lashon Hara, that was terrible, that wasn't the worst. The worst of it all is that they made the Jewish people believe you're not going to be able to survive. You're not going to make it over there. You should give up in despair, throw in the towel, the game's over. You won't be able to make it. Says Rav Hirsch, that was the damage that the Meraglim did. That's the pain that they caused to our nation. And that's why if you look in the verses a little bit further on in this in the Parsha, it says, Ach ba'Hashem al timroidu. Don't rebel against Hashem. V'atem al tiro, do not fear. Because once that you fear, once that you give up hope, once that you begin to believe that the world is swirling all around us and the Jewish people were finished, there's nothing to do. So then you've rebelled against the Ribbono Shel Olam. And that is a terrible sin. And that is not who we are. That's not our nation. We are the nation that went into Mitzrayim, that went into Egypt. And yes, we assimilated, it's true. And we did a lot of horrible things over all the years. All that is true. But when the time came for Yetzias Mitzrayim, for the exodus from Egypt, we clung on to the coattails of Moshe Rabbeinu like nobody else ever did before. V'ya'aminu ba'Hashem u'v'Moshe, we became believers, faithful to the Ribbono Shel Olam. We went through the midbar, through the wilderness, enemies, Hashem took care of them. Clouds of glory protecting us. There was manna falling from the sky, food, water, everything we needed. We had nothing to despair, nothing to worry about. And if that's the way that Hashem would take care of us in the wilderness, not even our homeland, imagine how He would take care of us in Eretz HaKodesh, in the Holy Land itself, the land of Israel. Maybe there won't be clouds of glory. Maybe there won't be a well of Miriam to give us water. Maybe there won't be food falling from the sky. Maybe the enemies are going to be big, but we have nothing to worry and fear. Like it says in Tehillim, David HaMelech says in his famous words over here, Gam ki eilech b'geit salmoves, even if I walk down the valley of death, lo ira ra, I will fear no evil. Ki ata imadi, because you Hashem, you are with me. Shiftecha, your shevet, your rod, umishantecha, and your staff, which I will lean on. Hema yanachamuni, they will both comfort me. Says the Metzudas David on these words over here. Mashatamaka isi b'shevet shal yisurin. First you come HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you bring the staff of Yisurim, of suffering. You beat me with your rod. V'tachsa v'tismach isi. But after that, what do? You support me. You bring your staff and you allow me to use it as a crutch to support myself. Says the Metzudas David, Heim hamanachamim oisi. These are the things that bring me comfort. Ki b'zeh era shelo yazavtani lamikrim. I realize that you have never left me alone to the happenstance and the coincidence of this world. Even when I will see that there are difficulties, says King David, even when I will feel the challenges beating upon me, but I know that in one moment afterwards, you allow me to lean on you, and you support me, and you hold me, and you embrace me, and you make sure that I keep taking steps forward and walking in the right direction. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are so kind. Yes, it's true. There's got to be difficulties. That's the nature of this world. I'm not going to avoid that. And yes, it's true the Jewish people had to go into Eretz Yisrael and there was going to be big wars and battles they would have to fight. No one's going to deny that. But never forget, Klal Yisrael, who's supporting you? Who's behind you? Who's holding you up in the times of your life when you need to be held up the most? nobody else, none other than the Ribbono Shel Olam, than the Master of the universe himself. And therefore, when the Meraglim came in and they told over this terrible Lashon Hara, this evil gossip about the land, and they frightened the Jewish people, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of that fright and that despair, you cried Bechiyah Shel Chinam. Chinam means no reason. Because if you would just believe in me, and you would understand that I'm supporting you, and I'm always next to you and always behind you, you would know you don't have to worry about anything. So your tears were all for naught. But on that night, you made yourself not like Klal Yisrael. You made yourself not like the Jewish people. You made yourself not like Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, not like a Moshe Rabbeinu. You made yourself estranged from me. You forgot that I take care of all of your needs. You forgot that I'm always there holding you up through every step of the way. And therefore, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you divorce yourself from what it means to be a Jew, and when the nation as a whole is not behaving as we are supposed to, that creates terrible ripple effects, not only at that moment, says the Gemara, but for all generations. Every single year on Tisha B'Av, we'll have to remind ourselves what it means to be a Jew. As we sit on the floor and we go through Eicha, the terrible lamentations of all the destruction that took place in the times of the temple, and we go through the Kinais, all of these prayers and these dirges and these supplications that we have to Hashem, which bespeak about tragedies and horrors that we had in our history, there's one thing that we have to keep in mind, and that is that through everything, we're still here. It's true that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed twice. It's true that there were crusades twice or three times. It's true that there were pogroms, too many to be able to count. And there was a Holocaust 75, 80 years ago, which took 6 million of our brethren, our precious children, and our people of Klal Yisrael. It's all true. But we're still here. We didn't disappear yet. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't wipe us off the map. The nations that rise up against us, they can't get rid of us. As much as they try, they just can't get rid of us. Because even though that we will walk down the valley of death, and even though that it will be dark sometimes, and there will be ominous, foreboding news all around us, Hashem iti v'lo ira ra, Hashem is with me, and I have nothing at all to fear or to worry about. That's the growth, and that's the inspiration that we're supposed to have on Tisha B'Av. Yes, we can get lost in the tragedies, and we have to shed tears, especially after a year like we had this year. How many hundreds, if not thousands, at least 1,000 Jews across the world passed away because of the coronavirus just in the last several months. How many children are suffering from so many months not in school? How many marriages are with such tension after being locked up with their wives and their husbands for 4 to 5 months already? How many people are missing work and business and don't have money to pay the rent this month? How many? So many. We have a lot to be in angst about and to be tragedies that we have to cry about. All true. But at the end of Tisha B'Av, we have to emerge not broken and not sad and not depressed and not hopeless over the state of the world and Klal Yisrael, but rather we have to emerge from a Tisha B'Av inspired. When we realize what exactly it means to be a Jew. What it means to be a Jew is I'm a person that never gives up hope on anything in my life. Because I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with me all the time. And even though there will be beatings, and even though there'll be challenges and there'll be suffering, at the same exact time, Hashem is giving us His staff, supporting us, holding us up, making sure that we continue to go forward in life. If you would have asked a Jew on the day that the camps were liberated 80 years ago in Auschwitz, that if there would ever be a nation of Klal Yisrael again, that would spread throughout America, Europe, England, Eretz Yisrael, with yeshivas, with schools, with people living frum lives, writing svarim, building buildings, doing all the amazing things that we do. If you would have asked them, do you believe in such a thing? So if you ask the right person, they would say, of course. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us, and we have nothing to fear. He brought the staff. He brought the rod of affliction, but He's supporting us every single step of the way. And when we go through a Tisha B'Av, and we read the words that are there, and we recognize and we see how good our lives really are, everything that we could accomplish, if only we will try, then a person will be able to know that Hashem is with me, I have nothing to fear, and I'm so proud, and I'm so honored to be part of Klal Yisrael. Because with all of the tragedies behind us, and of course nobody knows what's lurking in the corners in front of us, Rachman al-Itzlan, but I know that Hashem is with me. I will not give up hope, not a second. If I give up hope, I'm not being Jewish. If I despair, I'm not being Jewish. If I mourn my fate in this world and I get anxious about the situation that's going on in my life, that's not the way that a Yid, the way that a Jew does things. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those tears, those are the crocodile tears of the nation in the Midbar, in the wilderness over there. They cried for Chinam for nothing. They forgot who's running the world. And that's why it says over here, Ach b'Hashem al timrodu, don't rebel against Hashem. He's with you. And if we live like that and we run our lives like that, then we can say confidently the other words of David HaMelech, where King David says over so beautifully, Kaveh el Hashem, hope to Hashem, Chazak v'yametz libecha, strengthen your heart. V'kaveh el Hashem, and hope to Hashem. Says Rav Hirsch on these lines, even if your hopes seem to be not fulfilled, your prayers go unanswered, nevertheless you should remain strong and you should gather courage. And Kaveh el Hashem, another time, hope to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, never cease to give up hope. And that's our life. Our life is a life where we're always hoping, and we are probing, and we are growing, and we are striving, and we are trying to make sure that whatever situation we will find ourselves in life, we always invite the Ribbono Shel Olam into it. Because He's right here, and He wants to help. And the Zohar writes that we refer to the divine presence as the Shekhinah. And the Shekhinah itself is, in the Hebrew grammar, is the feminine form. Right? Is God, he or she, he's not, we call him Vino Malkeinu, he's our father, our king. But he's also the Shekhinah, he's also in a feminine form. So what does that mean? So the Zohar says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Ima de Eloi. The Ima de Eloi means that Hashem He's the lofty, elevated mother. He's the transcendent mother of Klal Yisrael. A father has certain character, certain traits that he brings to the children, certain protection that he brings to a child. But who knows the mother, the Jewish mother, the way that she cares for her children, the way that she hopes for her children, the way that she prays for her children, the way that she'll do anything for her children. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Ima Eloi. He is the transcendent, loftiest of all mothers of this world, who cares so deeply for every single neshama, every soul of every single Jew that there is in this world. And when you have a mother like that on your side, who's praying for you and davening for you and hoping for you and wants only the best for you, so then we know that we really have nothing at all to worry about. And I want to leave off with a story just about this. It's Very powerful story. And it's about the koyach, the power of the Jewish neshama, the power of the Yiddish mama, of a Jewish mother, and the power of the Ima di Eloi, the lofty, transcendent mother of this world, the Ribbono Shel Olam. There was a wonderful family in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and the parents, David and Chana, had a son whose name was Shlomo. Shlomo was a very good boy. He wasn't the brightest boy in the world. He wasn't the greatest in all of his activities in the world, but he was a very sweet, happy-go-lucky boy. And his life was very consistent. There was nothing out of the ordinary. And he went on like this, always coming home from school each and every day, excited, in a good mood. Whether he understood what the Rebbe said, he didn't understand everything, but he was a good kid at heart, and he was always in a happy mood. One day, unfortunately, when he was already in high school, he came home and his mother noticed that he didn't have a smile on his face. He rather quickly came into the house, put down his backpack, and ran to his room. And his parents understood that something was wrong. And they began asking him, Shlomi, is everything okay? But he didn't really respond. Over the next few months, Shlomi's grades began to drop drastically. He began hanging out with friends that were not the regular friends that he normally was. And every time that his parents tried to step in and have a conversation with him and talk to him, what's going on in your life, Shlomi? He used to tell them, just give me some space. I need to breathe. Just leave me alone. Totally uncharacteristic for this sweet boy who always spoke with derech eretz, with honor and respect to his children, to his parents. And then one day the phone call came from the yeshiva. And that was that the Rosh Yeshiva said that Shlomi had not been showing up to night seder, to the classes at night. And they were a little bit concerned. They didn't know what's going on. So David and Chana, the parents, they sat down with Shlomi that night. And they began speaking to him. Can you tell us what's going on? How come you're not coming to class at night? Is everything all right? But he was totally indifferent, would not speak to them and answer their questions. And they began wondering, what happened to our child over here? So they spoke to the chinuch experts, to the rabbanim, to the rebbeim, and they tried to get a clear path. How are they going to help this boy? And every once in a while, there would be like a glimmer of light, a little flicker of hope. Things looked like they were changing, but then suddenly, as fast as it would go back to that they would look at their son. This is not our son. What's he doing? How's he behaving? What's going on over here? Every single morning, Chana would wake up, and her pillow was tear-drenched from all of the tears and all the tehillim and all the prayers that she uttered every single night because she wanted her son back so much. She davened, she wept, she gave tzedakah to notable causes that she held would hopefully be a segula, be like a treasure for them that would help to bring their son back. But despite the cries, and despite all the tzedakah and all the heartache, the yeshiva called and said, your son is now becoming a negative influence on the other boys in the yeshiva. And we have no choice. We can't keep him here any longer. We have to ask him to leave the yeshiva. When he came home after that, it was quickly, the spiral began getting worse and worse and worse. His Yiddishkeit was dropping daily. Until one Friday night, when his mother would set the table every single Friday night for him to come, he did sometimes would come to the table, sometimes not. This Friday night, he wasn't home. 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, finally Chana hears the door open up. And she sees her son drunken walk in, talking on his phone Friday night, Shabbos, smoking a cigarette, drunk as you could imagine, and he goes into his room, topples onto his bed, and he goes to sleep. At this point, the parents don't know what to do. This is open and blatant Chil Shabbos, desecration of Shabbos in their house. There's other kids around. This is not such a good situation. So they spoke to their Rav. They went for advice how to deal with it. And they sat down with their son Shlomi and they said, we love you and we care about you. And we want you to stay home. But we cannot have open Shabbos desecration in our house. So you'll decide what you want to do. Shortly after that, Shlomo snuck out of the house, never to return. Where did he go? He traveled from Jerusalem and he went to Tel Aviv because he heard in Tel Aviv a lot of these young men and young women who come from beautiful religious families who are finding their way into another derech off the pathways of Yiddishkeit, and they're walking in other avenues. They go to Tel Aviv. There's like a whole scene over there of all of these children in pain that are running away from what they had, and they're trying to start their lives over there without the pressure, without the guilt, without anything that they left over in their homes. And so he goes to this place and he meets them. They're very friendly with him at first. Some of them grew up religious, some of them weren't religious at all. And they have like an apartment, a filthy apartment where they live together. It's like, I don't know, some like commune over there. And he goes in there and he can't believe where he got himself. He left his house and he's sitting in this filthy, dirty place. And he's beginning to get very depressed and very sad. And he starts thinking about his family, about his life that he gave up and that he left. But he's trying not to think about it too much because then you start to feel guilty. So what happened? The other people, the other young men and women that were there in this house, they realized that Shlomi was still a little bit too attached to his past. And when someone walks into that environment and they still think about their home in Jerusalem, so then it makes all the other kids that are in that room, makes them start feeling very bad as well. And they don't want to feel guilty. Nobody wants to feel guilty when they're doing the wrong thing. So they started giving it to Shlomi over here. They started making fun of him. They started putting him down. They started telling him, you're too sensitive. You're too this. You're too emotional. You're too that. Why did you grow up already? You came here, so you won't become part of the program. And now you could only imagine this poor guy. Ran away from his family, left it all behind, comes to Tel Aviv to try to find some place where he's going to fit in. And now they're turning on him as well. So after several months of this, the misery got to the point he couldn't handle it anymore. And he decided he's going to end his misery. And there in Tel Aviv, there's a place called the Azrieli Towers. Very, very tall buildings. And he decides he's going to go to the top of that tower and he's going to jump off the top and he's going to end this miserable life that he has. As he's walking in through the underground parking lot to get into the building, he sees a bunch of papers flying on the ground. Like flyers, papers. And curious to see what's blowing, he picks one up and he sees it's an advertisement for Kever Rachel, for the gravesite of Rachel Imenu, our matriarch Rachel. And it's advertising what's called the Koilel Chatzais, which is a special kollel that stays the whole night, every night, and it learns in Kever Rachel. And they say Tikkun Chatzais, which is a special prayer which mourns the loss of the temple. And they learn Torah and they say Tehillim. And if you want, you could sponsor over here. It's good. It's a good sponsorship for bring bracha to your life. He throws the paper back down on the ground. And he starts walking now towards the building. And suddenly another paper sticks to his foot. And he tries shaking off his foot to get rid of it. But it's stuck right there. And he bends down and he takes the paper off. And it's the same thing again. This advertisement for Kever Rachel, for the Koilel Chatzais, the Koilel that learns all night long in Kever Rachel. And suddenly at that moment, he can't even describe why, but at that moment suddenly he felt that Rachel Imenu was calling him to come home. And he says, when I was a young boy, I used to learn so much about Rachel Imenu, about our great matriarch Rachel. Maybe there I'll find myself. Maybe over there I'll fit in. Maybe over there somebody will accept me. Oh, what I would do for my mother right now. And so he walks out of the building and he flags down a taxi and he drives from Tel Aviv to Kever Rachel. And he walks in. And as he walks in, anybody who's ever been there before, you could try to imagine the scene. He walks into the doors over there and he looks off to the right, and exactly as it was in the picture, there's all the men sitting and learning, saying Tikkun Chatzais, the special prayers for the Beis HaMikdash, all night long. And then he begins transfixed on the caver, on the tombstone itself. And he walks into the area. There's men that are davening, there's men that are saying Tehillim, there's men that are learning. And he suddenly walks over to the tomb of Rachel Imenu, and he throws himself on the tomb, and he just begins crying out his heart, pouring out all the pain of these last few years in his life. And as he's crying and crying and crying, he lifts up his head. His eyes are blurry with tears. He looks on the tomb, and there's a paper that is written. And on that paper, on the tomb, it says, please daven for Shlomo ben David v'Chana, that he merit to do tshuva, and that Hashem light up his eyes to Torah. May he bring true nachas to his parents and the Almighty. I'm Shlomo ben David v'Chana. That's me they're talking about. So they want me to do tshuva. They want me to come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm the only one that can do that. And suddenly, out of earshot, he hears, because the way the tomb works, on one side is the men, the other side is the women. He suddenly hears a woman's voice rising up in tears. And she says, please, Ribono Shel Olam, please let my son Shlomo ben David v'Chana do tshuva. If only you would know how much we love him, how much we care about him, how much we want him back in our lives, in our house. Tell him that we'll take him however he comes, however he dresses, however he looks. We don't care. We just want our son back. Please, Hashem, help us. And he realizes his mother is on the other side of the tomb, and she is pouring her eyes and her heart and her tears out for him. And he's crying, and he's getting weak, and he's dehydrated from a long day, and the emotions get to him, and the next thing you know, he drops dead in a faint. And they call Hatzalah, quickly, Hatzalah, save him. Hatzalah comes in there, paramedics, they get him back going, they get him little by little until finally the pulse is there, and he's breathing, and his eyes are open, and he's awake, and they realize he's okay. Now we can transfer him to the hospital. And as the stretcher is going past the women's section, suddenly the mother of Shlomo turns for a glance to see the stretcher going by. And she looks at the boy who's lying on there, and she sees it's her son. And she says, that's my son. Ani ha'ima shelo, I'm his mother. And they said, are you sure, miss? She says, Ken, yes. Ani ima shelo, I'm his mother. Let me come with you. And they said, certainly come. And she went with them in the ambulance, and the rest of the story is history. Our Ima, our mother Eloi, the lofty, transcendent mother, the Ribono Shel Olam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching down on us, and He is supporting us, and He is davening for us, and He wants the best for us. And not once in our long history, with all of the mistakes and all the failures, and all of the times that we went against the Ribono Shel Olam, not once did HaKadosh Baruch Hu ever stop hoping in us, and ever stop believing in us, and ever stop letting us believe in ourselves that we could accomplish, and we could achieve, and we could become the people that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to become. And when we go into Tisha B'Av this year, Instead of spending so much time focusing in on what we don't have anymore, and who we're not anymore, and all the Jews that were lost, that no longer walk the world, and all the Beis HaMikdash that we don't have, and so on and so forth. Let us find consolation and comfort in the fact that we still have the Ribbono Shel Olam. We still have the Master of the universe on our side behind us, waiting to give us everything that we ask for and we want. If only one thing: don't rebel against the Ribbono Shel Olam. Don't throw in the towel. Don't despair and don't give up hope. On the other hand, rather, don't fear a thing, because Hashem is with us everywhere that we go. May we be Zeiche Im Yirtzeh Hashem, that instead of sitting on the floor tomorrow night, we suddenly hear in the distance, we hear the call of Mashiach telling us, since that you believed in Hashem all of these years, since that you didn't despair and you didn't give up hope, and you didn't turn your back on the Iva the Eloi, on the great mother of Klal Yisrael that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, therefore you're Zeicha, you merit. Instead of sitting on the floor in Tarzan or Los Angeles, New York, Baltimore, wherever a person might be, you will be Zeicha to be singing and dancing together ba'achdus as one in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh b'imheira v'yameinu. Have an easy and a meaningful fast to everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi Horowitz.